So recently I got a chance to hang out with my buddy Mike from Everyday BBQ YouTube channel. Mike is a great guy. He is a true family man that loves barbecue and goes out of his way to tell his friends how much he cares about him. Plus he's got the world's cutest dog, never skips leg day, and points great in pictures. He's a perfect friend. So I'm still recovering from surgery that I talked about in the last video, so we thought instead of cooking a brisket or cooking ribs or something like that, we just do something simple, like solve the Kennedy assassination. It's just easier. There once was a president named John F. Kennedy, whose life was tragically cut short. The reasons? Unknown. The motives? Many. The culprit, for the purposes of not getting censored by YouTube, certain. Lee Harvey Oswald. This is Two Barbecue Guys Solve Crime. Kinda. Okay, quick recap. Kennedy was killed in Dallas, Texas in 1963 when he was on a tour with his wife Jackie and the governor of Texas, Connolly. Okay? He had made it through most of downtown Dallas unscathed until he got to the end of downtown to a place where we call Dealey Plaza. This is Dealey Plaza. Dealey Plaza, the caravan that had been coming down Main Street, going this direction, took a right on Houston Street and then a left on Elm Street. This is actually going to be important later. That took them right by the school book Depository, where supposedly Lee Harvey Oswald, acting alone, took 3 shots at the president, and his aim got progressively better as they got further away and closer to this grassy knoll. Probably just a coincidence though, because you know the official story, anything politicians tell you is always true on YouTube. We know that. Lee Harvey Oswald then supposedly went and killed a police officer named J.D. Tippit, and then he was taken into custody, where 2 days later he was shot in police custody in the police station by a guy named Jack Ruby. So Jack Ruby was a real piece of work. He was a local thug. He was a nightclub owner, and by nightclub I mean nightclub where women take their clothes off. That probably got cleaned up because this happened in the 60s. Probably a gun runner. He was definitely a drug dealer. He was involved in prostitution. Basically all around terrible person. And he says the reason why he shot Lee Harvey Oswald was to spare Mrs. Kennedy the pain of having to come back to Dallas and deal with a trial. What a great guy. So legend has it, there's a local pizza restaurant here called Campisis, where Jack Ruby hatched his plan to kill Lee Harvey Oswald. So right away, Mike and I knew where we needed to start our investigation. This is famous because this is where Jack Ruby hatched his scheme to kill Lee Harvey Oswald after the assassination of President Kennedy.
And we sat in the same booth that he sat in.
We sat in the exact booth, the Jack Ruby booth. What do you think?
I like it.
Jack Ruby's booth.
I'll be right back. Okay.
This is where it all happened. The big plan. To spare Mrs. Kennedy the need to come back to Dallas. Bless her heart. He's such a patriot.
History in the making.
Yeah, here we are. This is the chopped salad. Is that what we got?
Yeah, chopped salad.
Nice. We got the meatballs and red sauce.
And bread that we're going to try not to eat.
Yeah, we're going to avoid that. We don't need any more of that. Here, and it's like going back in time, isn't it?
Yeah, it was really cool. I mean, I love the whole layout of the place. It reminds me of a lot of places that I was at as a kid.
Yeah.
But to be able to sit in that booth, that just makes it so much fun.
Yeah.
Where are we headed next?
We're going downtown. We're going to go to the 6th floor museum.
All right.
See where all the action totally happened. And the government never lies to us about anything. Guys, this is the Warren Commission. This is the people that came up with the official story of the Kennedy assassination. Here's part of the reason why people have a problem with what they said. These people were handpicked by LBJ. A lot of them were his friends. A lot of them were people that he could leverage, he could manipulate into doing things that he didn't want them to do. There were a lot of problems with the way this whole commission conducted themselves. Not all of them unethical, but a lot of it at least incomplete. But there was one problem that stands out amongst all of them, and that is this guy right here. This is Allen Dulles. He was the director of the CIA when Kennedy came into office. Kennedy fired him because Dulles went to Kennedy. He so much wanted to invade Cuba that he suggested that Kennedy actually bomb American sailors and troops dressed as Cubans so that the Americans would be, at the time, would be so mad they would insist we invade Cuba. Kennedy, of course, told him to go screw himself, fired him, and somehow, of all the people on the planet, this guy ends up investigating who killed Kennedy. I mean, is that nuts or what? So we're approaching the building, and I've been sharing a lot of my thoughts about the official story. Okay, so here we are at the Texas School Book Depository, where Lee Harvey Oswald supposedly shot John F. Kennedy. Supposedly. I totally believe it. It totally happened the way they say it.
I don't know. I'm losing confidence in the story as we go.
I know, right? So if you were a lone gunman, which obviously Oswald was, why would you wait until Kennedy was past you versus right here, where you have a dead-on shot and they have nowhere to go? This is Houston Street. If they came down Houston Street, he would have had a dead-on straight shot right here. Instead, they creep down here and he shoots him when he gets halfway to the bridge. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it makes no sense.
It does. If somebody was looking for a target of opportunity, this would have been it. Because at this intersection, they had to slow down to like 3 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And it would have been boom, 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 right? But instead, they supposedly wait until he gets all the way down there.
So whoever would have been here, supposedly, so Oswald,
Well, over there,
yeah,
but yeah.
Oswald doesn't shoot at the most opportune moment when they slow down and make the turn.
Right.
Misses the closer shot and nails the two shots that are far away.
Right.
That would require like beyond expert marksmanship.
Right, which he didn't have.
He didn't have.
Right. That's right. I said chicken bones. There were chicken bones in the sniper's nest. Guess what? They didn't belong to Lee Harvey Oswald. Somebody had eaten their lunch in the sniper's nest, and it wasn't Lee Harvey. And he didn't see Lee Harvey. The Warren Commission interviewed Bonnie Ray Williams, the guy who'd eaten his chicken, right there near the sniper's nest. They interviewed him for a really, really long time and determined he was in that area up until right before the presidential motorcade went by. He'd gone up there to watch the president. And in the process, he ate his lunch, and then he left the bones there. And for some reason, he was never a suspect, which he shouldn't have been. He didn't do anything wrong. But in the process of his testimony, we find out that floor was under construction. There were a lot of people up there that day changing out the flooring on the 6th floor. It was a terrible spot to set up a sniper's nest. But we're to believe that Lee Harvey did it, even though Bonnie Ray Williams ate his lunch there and never saw him. And Lee Harvey was on the 2nd floor at the time of the shooting. Like, there was a cop who was right there. And as soon as the shots rang out, he ran straight into the building. He was on the 2nd floor 87 seconds later and bumped into Oswald on the 2nd floor in the break room.
But if you see the exit wound and everything going the opposite way, what would inspire somebody to run in this building, which would have required a shot from behind?
Because there were shots from behind. Yeah, there were shots from behind, there were shots from the front, particularly if you believe conspiracy theorists like this guy, Roy Kellerman, who reported to the Warren Commission that the bullets were like a flurry of shells coming into the car. Fortunately, we have politicians, and they always tell the truth. So they didn't listen to little things like eyewitness testimony and Secret Service people's opinions. They knew the truth. They told us, well, let's just get to what they told us. They told us that this was their conclusion. Lee Harvey Oswald alone shot from the 6th floor window. And as I said before, his aim got progressively better the further the car got away from him. So his first shot hit nothing. We know this because it chipped up pavement and hit somebody in the face, and a cop saw it happen. So that was their first bullet. The second, well, let's go with the third bullet. The third bullet was the kill shot. So if you've seen the Zapruder film, that was the third bullet. And then we have the second bullet. They call this the magic bullet. Here's why. The magic bullet, again, one bullet. We have one bullet to play with here, this one second bullet, because it had to be Lee Harvey Oswald, according to the politicians, according to the Warren Commission, and he had to be acting alone, and he didn't have enough time to shoot more than 3 times, right? So what they said happened was Lee Harvey Oswald fired a second bullet that went into the president's back, came out his throat, and then hit Connally 3 times, once in the back, once in the leg, once in the wrist. One bullet. That's why we call it the magic bullet. In addition, it had to change direction several times when it did it. But the good news is, in case you want to reuse it, it is in pristine condition. They found that bullet. And it is right here. After going through all those people, barely a scratch on it. So, yeah, if you're going to invest in bullets, invest in this bullet, because you can reuse them. Perfect shape after they hit 2 people 5 times. Yeah, so that's the official story from the Warren Commission. You know, those guys that we can totally trust to not be covering up anything. The hand-picked group of people that would never, ever, ever lie to us said that one bullet shot 2 men 5 times. And even that theory has problems. Because in 1997, thank goodness for the internet, it's forever, Gerald Ford admitted to altering the Kennedy autopsy. What he did was, he said, the autopsy said the first bullet went into Kennedy's back. He moved it up to his neck so it could be a through and through wound that would end up going into Connally. The doctors said that Kennedy actually had an entry wound from the front. Ford, though he says he's not trying to deceive but actually add clarity, moved the autopsy bullet in his back up so that it could be a through and through wound. And he's not even denying it. He didn't come out and say it until he was caught, but then he didn't deny it because he said he was going to create clarity for the American people by altering the autopsy to make one bullet be able to go through President Kennedy and then into Connally and still magically somehow cause all that damage in Connally. It is way, way more likely there were multiple shooters coming from multiple directions, is what conspiracy theorists like Mr. Roy Kellerman, this guy, who described it as a flurry of bullets coming into the car from all directions. So he did get shot in the back.
Okay.
Most likely there were multiple shooters.
Right.
And this isn't the Congress decided this in the 70s. There was definitely a conspiracy. They just didn't go so far as to say Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't the only one who hit him. But they said there was definitely multiple shooters.
Okay.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
But yeah, he was definitely shot in the back. That was the wound that Gerald Ford admitted to changing the autopsy report on in the 70s. That was an entrance wound from his back. So at least one shot came from here, or this direction, and then there was probably a shooter right here in this building that used to be the Daltex building.
Did they find the angle of the shot that came from the back? Was it going downward? Was it going straight?
Well, that's what makes their official story stupid. It was going downward, and then they say it turned upward. So it hit him and then started an upward trajectory after it entered his back.
And that's the bullet that's in perfect tact.
Yeah. And there's probably a picture. No. At this point, Mike and I leave the 6th floor museum and we head down here to the famous grassy knoll. And we're right here when we're having this conversation. And I want you to just notice how close this is to this car as opposed to here. All right, Mike. You see that X right there in the middle of the street? That's where the headshot was. Up there was where the first 2 shots were. So you remember, the Zapruder film?
No.
That main film that everybody sees when you actually see the headshot is called the Zapruder film.
Okay.
If you've seen Kennedy get assassinated, you've seen
the film.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was filming like this direction. And so when he gets his head blown off, like we're about 20 feet from the spot he was in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this is the grassy knoll right here. And I mean, as you can see, he's like 50 feet away. I mean, how far do you think that is?
Probably 50 to 70 feet.
Yeah. So on the flip side, if there was a grassy knoll shooter, he was right there. But come on, I'll show you. If there was a grassy knoll shooter, this was his viewpoint, and then you can see the axe. Let me zoom in. You can see the axe right there, and this, like, and if you look at the angles, most likely, like, this is where the shot. At least one of the shooters.
Well, it would have been easier to land a shot here than there.
Totally. So he would set up right here, and then jet back this way, and get out of sight. Crazy, huh?
Very crazy.
So this is one last look of this is called I think it's called the Mormon photo. It was taken right at the moment Kennedy was shot. Mike and I were standing right about here. There's some discrepancy about if there was another shooter. Was he here or was he down here? Either way, you can see the angle. You can see where it famously knocks Kennedy's head back and to the left, as they say. This angle explains a lot. It really does. This policeman was so covered in goo that he actually thought he was shot. He stopped his motorcycle because he had so much material all over him that it splattered him. This also explains why Mrs. Kennedy... A shot from the front would explain why Mrs. Kennedy went out over the back of the car to collect brain matter, which she handed to the hospital, the doctors at Parkland, in case they could put it back in, I guess was her thought. She was very traumatized. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I don't think anyone knows for sure what happened, but this magic bullet theory is insulting. This doesn't explain a lot of things, but this angle would at least partially explain what happened to this policeman and why his head got knocked back and why the brain matter went all over the car. So, yeah. Yeah, I can't just breeze past this because it's pretty important because, yes, an officer named J.D. Tippit lost his life that day, and it's really, really sad. The problem is there's just not a lot of evidence linking Lee Harvey Oswald to that killing. The bullets they found in the autopsy of the police officer didn't match Oswald's gun. For a while there, they thought they had his wallet because, people tend to carry 2 wallets and then drop one whenever they shoot someone. But when they arrested him at the Texas theater not much later, he had his wallet on him, so they made that wallet disappear, even though it had been on the news that night. There's a lot of shady things that went on. But the Warren Commission did have one thing going for him. And this is important because there's a little bit of circular reasoning when it comes to J.D. Tippit and Kennedy, because people will say, well, why did he kill Tippit? And the answer is, well, he killed the president. Why wouldn't he kill a cop, right? And then they'll say, well, why did he kill the president? I don't know, but he killed that cop, so of course he killed the president. He's just a killer. He's just a bad dude. He's a bad guy, right? Okay, so this piece of evidence, that it needs to stick. The one person eyewitness who saw the shooting, her name was Helen Markham. Helen Markham was a real interesting character because she never could get her story straight. She would go out and she would talk to people, and every time she'd tell the story, she'd describe Lee Harvey differently. She said he was anywhere from 18 to 30, depending on who she was talking to. She said he was skinny to chubby. She said he had brown hair, dark hair, bushy hair. It was a crazy. And so the Warren Commission, because she was an eyewitness, they kept taking her seriously. They kept bringing her back in. And ultimately, this is what they used to not convict because it wasn't a trial. But this testimony is what they used to say, yeah, Lee Harvey definitely killed J.D. Tippit, right? And the reason this is important is is because somebody did kill J.D. Tippit. And if it's not Lee Harvey, who was it? You know? So this is what they went on. This is what they decided was good testimony. And this is just a snippet. Again, they interviewed her 3 times. Imagine this in a congressional setting. So they're asking her about the lineup where she identified Lee Harvey Oswald from a lineup, right? And so they're asking her these setup questions. They're like, on the wrong page. They're like, did a police officer say anything to you before you went in there to tell you, like, this is the right man or something like that? Anything like that? No, sir. Okay, so no statements like that. Did anybody tell you that the man you were looking at would be in a certain position in the lineup or anything like that? No, sir. So now, when you went into the room, you looked these people over, these 4 men? Yes, sir. Did you recognize anyone in the lineup? No, sir. You did not. Did you see anybody? I've asked you these questions before. Did you recognize anybody from their face? From their face? No. Did you identify anyone of these 4 people? And she goes, I didn't know nobody. And the guy says, I know you didn't know anybody, but did anybody in that lineup look like anybody you'd seen before? And she said, no, I'd never seen any of them. None of these men. No one of the 4 men? No, not one of them. No one of all 4. This is word for word. Okay, well, more or less. I may have made it sound more like me a little bit there, but basically this is the transcript. This is the exact transcript. None of the all 4? No, sir. So at this point, they decide they got to change tactics because she's clearly lost the plot here. Oswald was number 2 in the lineup of 4 people, and there were problems with the lineup anyways, but that's beyond the scope of this video. So they're gonna prompt her to try to get the right answer out of her. So remember, Oswald was number 2. So the next question he asked, was there a number 2 man in there? And she wrote back, oh, number 2 is the one I picked. Okay, well, I thought you told me that you hadn't. Well, I thought you wanted me to describe their clothing. No, I wanted to know if that day when you were in there, if you saw anyone in there. Well, number 2. What did you say when you saw number 2? Well, let me tell you. I said that second man, and they kept asking me which one. I said number 2, and when I said number 2, I just got weak. This is what she wrote, or this is what she said. Okay, what about number 2? What did you mean when you said number 2? Number 2 was the man I saw shoot the policeman. Okay, so you recognized him from his appearance? Well, I looked at him, and when I saw this man, I wasn't sure, but I had just cold chills run all over me. When you saw him, remember, because she just told him she'd never seen him before. So he's like, when you saw him, you got cold chills. And she said, yeah, when I saw the man, but I wasn't sure. So you see, when I told them I wanted to be sure and looked at his face, and what I was looking at mostly is what I looked at on account of his eyes, the way he looked at me. So I asked them if they could turn him sideways. They did. And when they turned him back around, and I said the second, they said that, which one? And I said number 2. So when I said that, well, I just sort of fell over. This is it. This is the evidence. This is the strong evidence. This person, who you can find a video of her on YouTube. Look for Helen Markham on YouTube. You'll find an interview. See the kind of person this was. Might have been a lovely person. She may have been in shock. She clearly seemed to enjoy the attention. And that was the strong evidence. Did you recognize him? No. They gave me the chills, and then I fell over. I passed out. That's how I knew it was him. That is the strongest evidence we have linking Lee Harvey Oswald to the murder of J.D. Tippit. Politicians. Thank you guys for indulging this video. Like I said, it's just a fun, history project, I guess, for me and Mike. Mike, it was great hanging out with you. I love you, buddy. I want to say special thanks to America's Untold Stories with Eric Hunley and Mark Robert. If you want a good resource on the Kennedy assassination, you need to check out that channel. It's the best there is on YouTube. Also, you can read the National Archives and see the documentation that gets declassified. Read it for your own eyes. That's what actually got me into this. I was reading these declassified documents, and I realized how little of it lined up with what the official story says. And it like every time I pulled at any given thread, the story got worse and worse. And so I couldn't stop reading about it. And in fact, I'm pretty sure that's why most people who are conspiracy theorists get into it. It's not that they're conspiracy theorists, it's just once you start paying attention, so little of it adds up. The whole story is like tissue paper, and if you poke on any little spot in the story, your finger goes right through it. So anyways, it was fun. Thank you guys for watching. I'm still healing up. Once I'm back to 100%, I will continue making more videos, more cooking videos, and I appreciate you indulging me on this one. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one.